it's looking like Alyssa Thomas and the Phoenix Mercury are going to be fined because she just said nah. She just said nah. And I'm sorry, like, you can't have all the smoke. You cannot be there chirping with fans the whole game. You cannot be allegedly telling fans DeWanna chose to join a real basketball team. You cannot be saying stuff.
Picture this. You're one of the WNBA's most vocal players. You spend a whole game yelling trash to fans. You put up a monster performance. And then your team loses regardless. What do? Alyssa Thomas seems to just disappear into thin air, leaving behind her professional duties as if they never happened. People who think they're above the rules often...
And it looked like Alyssa Thomas will be getting fined for doing this in Indianapolis. Guys, for this...
get what they deserve. And Thomas is about to learn that the hard way. That Wednesday night in Indianapolis wasn't simply another basketball game that went awry. It was a lesson on how not to act as a professional athlete. And the effects are already starting to show. The Phoenix Mercury and their star forward are now facing fines from the league. And to be honest, they brought this on themselves. Let's rewind to where this whole disaster started. The Phoenix Mercury came to Gainbridge Fieldhouse to play the Indiana Fever in what should have been just another regular season game. But this was...
So Alyssa Thomas had all the smoke for the Fever fans. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, it wasn't just like just normal smoke. It wasn't just normal beef. It was what people from the country would call Dublin. She had the big smoke. Like, she absolutely had all the beef for... She, let the fans hear it, all of this stuff. Satu there, telling the fans to keep up the booze. And what did they do?
It wasn't just any old game. This was DeWanna Bonner's second time in Indianapolis. And if you know anything about that, you know the supporters were ready to let him know how they felt. Bonner, Thomas's fiancée, had basically deserted the Fever earlier this season after only 9 games. This left the team in a tough spot because they were already suffering with a lot of injuries and had to sign hardship contracts simply to have enough players. Think about that for a second. 9 games. That's all the patience Bonner had before deciding she wanted out, asking for a trade, and then refusing to even travel with the team while negotiations were going. It's providing massive LeBron leaving Cleveland feelings. Except at least LeBron stuck around for 7 years before making his decision. Bonner couldn't even give it 2.5 weeks of actual...
Understand how a player in a professional sport can ever think that someone who left a team and left the team in a lurch, like DeWanna Bonner left the Indiana Fever in a time of adversity when multiple players were injured. They had to sign hardship contracts, and instead of saying, hey, this isn't working out, after 9 games, mind you, did not give it much time. 9 games was it. That's all she played with the Indiana Fever. Asking for a trade and
basketball. So when she went onto that court in Phoenix Mercury colors, you best believe the Indianapolis audience was ready to let her know exactly how they felt about athletes who jumped ship at the first sight of difficulty. The boos were loud, they were sustained, and they were totally justified. But here's where things get tricky, since Alyssa Thomas couldn't just leave her girlfriend take the heat alone. From the opening tip, Thomas was locked and loaded for verbal combat with the Fever faithful. We're talking about a veteran athlete who believed that engaging in back-and-forth trash language
and not traveling with your team after asking for something to be worked out, and then, not only that, pretty much forcing your way onto the Phoenix Mercury, which is a title-contending team and a team with her life partner on it. It just sounds very like I can get what I want when I want, and it doesn't matter what happens. And yes, I can see a fan base being quite upset with this. I mean, LeBron, when he left Cleveland, people were burning his jerseys. People were booing him.
With supporters was somehow a good look. When your team is up 25-13 in the first quarter and you're feeling yourself, it's easy to get caught up in the moment. Thomas was out there asking supporters to keep up the boos, getting into heated interactions and overall acting like she was bulletproof because her side had the early lead. The problem with talking that much trash is that basketball games last...
Something that not that she caused, not that necessarily DeWanna caused for herself. Like the booing and everything, DeWanna brought that in herself. Let's be completely real. Even Nate Tibbetts was just like, well, yeah, this is sports. Like, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but like their coach was even like, well, yeah, this is sports. This is sports. And like Alyssa Thomas not showing up, it's the most Alyssa Thomas thing ever, isn't it? You know, talk a big game, and then when anyone does anything negative towards you, let's just dodge. It is the most Alyssa Thomas thing ever. Like, we've seen it with some
40 minutes, not 10. And what transpired over those remaining 30 minutes was a catastrophic collapse that left Thomas looking like she'd bitten off considerably more than she could chew. The Indiana Fever, playing on their home court with their crowd behind them, converted that early deficit into a dominant 101-71 victory that left the Mercury looking totally shell-shocked. Now, here's the strange aspect.
Foul on Sophie Cunningham. That is her first team second. Coming in for Phoenix number 14, DeWanna Bonner.
About this whole situation. Thomas didn't just have a bad game and slink away with her tail between her legs. She actually played out of her mind. 32 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, shooting over 60% from the field. This was a season-best performance from a player who was trying everything she could to drag her side to victory. In any normal setting, a stat line like that would have Thomas front and center in the post-game media session, talking about how proud she was of her effort and how the team just needed to execute better as a unit. But evidently, when you spend 40 minutes running your mouth to fans and then watch your team be blasted...
All right, first of all, if you know or follow sports in like the slightest, you don't even have to be a fanatic to understand boos come with the territory. I have never seen a season without boos. Every time I go to a New York Liberty game and the Indiana Fever play, Sophie Cunningham just steps on the court or gets announced or anything, it's met with boos from the crowd. For whatever reason, and I'm not saying I agree with it, but it's never something that I thought to write about. It's never something that I thought to post to social media.
Out anyway. Pride becomes a luxury you can't afford. Because when the final buzzer rang and it came time for Thomas to face the music, she was nowhere to be found. Gone. Vanished. Like she'd never existed in the first place. This isn't a casual suggestion we're talking about here. The WNBA has very clear regulations about media availability, and they're not optional. According to the league's 2025 season media access regulation, each team must make their head coach plus 2 players available to both in-person and Zoom media within 10 minutes of the final buzzer. Those 2 players? The team's leading scorer and a crucial contributor, given Thomas's 32-point performance. She wasn't just supposed to be there, she had to be there. Phoenix Mercury coach Nate Tibbetts showed up. Teammate Diana Taurasi showed up. They executed their jobs, addressed inquiries, and managed their professional commitments like grown-ups. But Thomas, the player who had spent the entire game jawing with supporters and putting on a show, she was nowhere to be seen. It's the kind of move that screams, I can dish it out, but I can't take it. And it's exactly the reverse of what you'd expect from a veteran leader on a championship contending team. The fan reaction to this disappearing act has been very savage, and understandably so. Social media went up quickly with individuals calling out the hypocrisy of Thomas's behavior. You can't spend 40 minutes shouting trash to fans, lose the game despite your best individual effort, and then run away when it's time to face questions about what went wrong. That's not veteran leadership. That's the conduct of someone who's used to having their way and throws a tantrum when things don't go according to plan. But here's what makes this situation even more pathetic. The backstory around this game adds layers of drama that Thomas should have seen coming from a mile away. This was always going to be an extremely charged workplace due to DeWanna Bonner's position. The fans were going to be furious, the media attention was going to be high, and everyone understood that Phoenix Mercury players, especially those close to Bonner, were going to be under extra scrutiny. A smart, professional athlete would have prepared for such situation. They would have realized that their behavior would be scrutinized intently and that any blunders would be exaggerated. Instead, Thomas entered into the circumstance and somehow convinced herself that she could act any way she wanted without consequences. She thought she could spew trash all game, watch her team lose, and then just disappear when it was time to be responsibility. The league doesn't play games when it comes to these violations either. Teams face rising fines for frequent offenses, and the WNBA has made it abundantly clear that media access isn't a suggestion, it's a must. When you're a professional athlete, part of your work extends beyond just playing the game. You have obligations to the media, to the fans, and to the league itself. Thomas felt she was above those commitments, and now she's ready to pay the consequence. What's particularly upsetting about this whole issue is that Thomas has a history of making contentious statements about professionalism and player unity. She's gone on record talking about how players in the league need to remain together and encourage each other. She's critiqued fan behavior and talked about the need of maintaining standards. But when it came time to live up to those same standards herself, she folded like a flimsy tent. The difference between Thomas's behavior and how other elite players handle adversity is glaring and disgusting. When Caitlin Clark faces hostile fans or gets targeted by opposition players, she handles it with elegance and still meets all her professional commitments. When other veterans suffer bad losses or face criticism, they show up and answer the hard questions. Thomas decided she was exceptional and didn't have to follow the same rules as everyone else. This type of behavior isn't new for Thomas either. She's had run-ins with fans before, made provocative comments during playoff runs, and generally carried herself like someone who believes the rules don't apply to her. This media availability infraction is just the latest example of a player who talks a big game about professionalism but can't live up to her own standards when things get tricky. The Phoenix Mercury organization deserves censure here too. How do you let your star player just depart without making sure she understands her obligations? Where was the accountability from coaches or team management to ensure that Thomas satisfied her media duties regardless of how the game went? The fact that she was able to suddenly go demonstrates a lack of organizational supervision that's embarrassing for a team with championship hopes. This event also reveals some uncomfortable double standards that exist in the WNBA. If Caitlin Clark had performed this same stunt, avoiding mandated media availability after a high-profile game, the league would have came down on her like a ton of bricks. The criticism would have been quick and severe. But there's an expectation that certain players get different treatment based on their status or their history of criticism toward fan behavior. The timing of this affair couldn't be worse for the Mercury either. They're a serious championship candidate this season, having the talent and experience to make a real run at a crown. But championships are won by teams that manage adversity professionally and maintain their concentration when things get rough. Thomas just revealed that she might not be up to that standard, and now her team has to deal with the distraction of league fines and unfavorable media due to her poor decision-making. The bigger consequences for the WNBA are substantial too. The league is still attempting to establish itself as a truly professional business, and that means holding players accountable for their actions both on and off the court. When senior players skip their commitments and seemingly get away with it, it hurts the league's reputation and sends the incorrect message to younger players and fans who are watching. Professional sports leagues like the NBA, NFL, and MLB don't mess around with media availability violations. Skip your commitments, pay the fine, no questions asked. The WNBA needs to show they operate with the same level of professionalism and consistency, regardless of who the player is or what their personal issues might be. The absurdity of this entire situation is that Thomas actually had something great to talk about. Her performance was great, and she might have used the media availability to emphasize her work and enhance her own brand. Instead, she made herself the villain of the story and generated unnecessary drama for her team and the league. Looking ahead, this incident could have enduring ramifications for Thomas's reputation and her relationship with the media. Reporters don't forget when athletes ignore their commitments, and it could affect how she's covered and perceived moving forward. That's a self-inflicted damage that might have been easily prevented by simply showing up and doing her job. The instant karma part of this story couldn't be more perfect. Thomas spent the game yelling trash to supporters, watched her team get blown out despite her best individual effort, and then tried to evade culpability by departing. Now she's facing fines, public ridicule, and damage to her reputation that might last far longer than any financial punishment. At the end of the day, Alyssa Thomas made a terrible decision that reflects poorly on herself, her team, and the league as a whole. Professional athletes have obligations that extend beyond merely playing the game, and media availability is one of them. Thomas believed she was above those norms, and now she's about to realize that actions have repercussions. The fine she's facing is well-deserved, And hopefully it serves as a reminder that no athlete, regardless of their status or skill, is above the professional standards that make sports leagues great. This whole scenario serves as a fantastic example of how not to handle yourself as a professional athlete, and the karma couldn't be more fitting.